Okay, so, let's be real for a sec. Who hasn't spent, way too much time daydreaming about having it all, especially when it comes to, well, money?
It's definitely a juicy topic.
Totally. And it can feel kind of, I don't know, exciting and a little out there at the same time,
For sure.
which is why we're diving into the world of Abraham Hicks today.
Yeah.
We're going to unpack this really interesting Manifest Your Life with ZenM podcast episode. And by unpack, I mean really dig into the nitty-gritty.
Gotta love a good deep dive.
Right. But before we get too far, just a little reminder, this isn't about us telling you what to believe.
Absolutely not.
This is all about exploring these ideas and seeing what clicks with you.
Exactly. And I think what makes this whole topic so fascinating is that it forces us to look at how our thoughts, especially about something as, let's face it, loaded as money,
Totally.
how those thoughts might actually be shaping our reality.
It's kind of a lot when you really think about it.
It is.
So this podcast episode, they just jump right into Abraham Hicks's whole thing about the law of attraction,
Right.
which you've probably heard of.
Of course.
It's like that saying, like attracts like, but they take it a step further.
Okay, I'm listening.
So it's not just about, the stuff we see in the world around us. It's about the energy behind our thoughts and feelings, too.
So like if you're constantly stressing about bills,
Exactly.
you're actually putting that energy out there.
And attracting more of the same, right? Instead of saying, oh, I wish I could win the lottery and be rich, Abraham Hicks would probably say it's more about, really feeling abundant now, even if your bank account doesn't quite reflect that yet.
100%. It's like shifting your internal reality first.
Okay, so how do we actually do that? Because it's one thing to be think positive, but how do we actually shift those deep down beliefs we have about money?
Well, the podcast gives a few techniques, and one that really stood out to me was this idea of get this, a rampage of appreciation.
A rampage, okay.
Right. It sounds intense. But it's basically like instead of focusing on what you don't have or wishing you had more, you actively look for things to be grateful for financially, even small things.
So what? Give me an example.
Okay, so appreciating your paycheck.
Yeah.
Right. Even if it doesn't feel like enough, you're getting paid for your time and energy.
True.
Or maybe you got a discount on something, or even just being able to buy yourself a cup of coffee.
I can get behind that.
Right.
So it's about retraining your brain to see what you do have, which then can shift your whole money vibe.
Exactly.
Is there any psychological basis for this?
Oh, absolutely. There's actually a ton of research on gratitude and how it impacts your well-being overall.
Right.
And this rampage of appreciation, it's like a super targeted way to use that for finances.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you're basically building a new mental muscle.
Exactly. And this whole idea of actively shifting your mindset leads to another thing from the podcast, acting as if.
As if. As if what?
As if you're already abundant. Now, before you run out and buy a private island.
Yeah, I don't think that's what they mean.
Right. They're talking about embodying the feeling of abundance, but in, everyday ways.
Okay, I like that. Small steps.
Yeah.
So
They gave this example of changing your language. So instead of saying, ugh, there's no way I can afford that, you could try asking yourself, okay, how can I allow this into my life?
Ooh, I like that. Just that subtle shift.
Right. And it can be surprisingly powerful because you're going from this place of limitation
Yeah.
to a place of okay, this could actually be possible, which, kind of ties into the whole self-fulfilling prophecy thing. If you believe it's possible, you're more likely to take steps that lead you there.
Whoa. It's all connected. That's pretty wild.
Right.
But I have to imagine letting go of control, not knowing exactly how it's all going to work out, that's got to be a huge hurdle for most people.
Oh, for sure.
Especially when we're talking about something as, important as money.
Oh, absolutely. And the podcast actually addresses that head on. They use this analogy of planting a seed and then digging it up every 5 minutes to see if it's growing.
Oh my gosh, that is so me. Impatient much.
We've all been there. But, when we're constantly worried and anxious,
Yeah.
we're sending out mixed signals. It's like saying we want something, but not really believing we deserve it.
Okay, so then how do you quiet that inner critic?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right. How do we actually embrace the whole trust part of this? I feel like that's a whole other deep dive in itself.
And that's where I think, mindfulness comes in.
Yeah.
The podcast host talked about things like meditation or even just, Taking a few deep breaths,
Okay.
just to kind of calm that anxiety and make space for trust.
So it's like hitting the pause button on the freak out and just being like, okay, I'm just going to trust the process, even though you have no idea what's going to happen.
Exactly. And that leads into this other really interesting thing from the podcast, this idea that abundance is actually like our birthright.
Okay, now we're getting into the good stuff.
Right.
But I can already hear people listening being like, hold on, if it's my birthright, then why is my bank account looking like this?
Totally. It's a bold statement for sure.
Hardly.
And it can be hard to hear that, especially if, you've always been told that money is hard to come by.
Right, like you have to fight for every penny.
Exactly.
So then how do we even begin to wrap our heads around this whole abundance is my birthright thing?
Well, I think it starts with really looking at those limiting beliefs, the beliefs we have about ourselves and money. Like the podcast host said, if we truly believe that we deserve abundance, wouldn't that change everything?
You'd probably make different decisions if you weren't coming from a place of fear, right?
Exactly. And that's kind of where the magic happens. It's not just about like manifesting a pay raise. It's about like shifting your energy.
So it's bigger than money. It's about like abundance in all areas of your life.
Exactly. And the podcast host was really clear about that.
Hmm.
The universe doesn't see a difference. It's all energy. So it doesn't matter if you're trying to attract more money, a loving relationship. It all comes down to the same principle.
You have to match the energy of what you want.
Yes.
And that's where those tools we talked about come in, right? Like
Right.
the rampage of appreciation, acting as if, visualizing. They're all just helping us get into that energetic space.
Exactly. But we have to remember, it's not an overnight thing.
Right. Rome wasn't built in a day.
Exactly. It takes time. And the podcast host made a point of saying, don't beat yourself up if you don't become a millionaire tomorrow. It's about the journey, not the destination.
I like that. It's about enjoying the process, right?
Totally. It's about cultivating that mindset of abundance and trusting that even if we can't see it yet, things are shifting, which, let's be honest, is a lot easier said than done.
For sure.
Yeah.
Especially when the world is constantly bombarding you with messages of scarcity.
Right. Like
Yeah.
you said before, you have to fight for every penny. That's the message we're always getting.
So how do we block that out?
I think that's where like mindfulness and gratitude are so important. It helps you tune out the noise
Yeah.
and reconnect with that part of yourself that knows you're worthy.
That inner voice that's like, wait a minute, I deserve good things.
Exactly. Because when you can really tap into that, like really believe it, it changes everything. You show up differently, you act differently, you make different choices.
You become a magnet for abundance. Speaking of which, before we move on, I wanted to circle back to this whole idea of abundance as a birthright, because I don't know about you, but it took me a while to really get my head around that one.
It's a big one.
It is. So I just want to give our listeners a chance to really sit with this question. What if abundance really is your birthright?
How would that change things for you?
Welcome back to the deep dive. I feel like we've been on a journey today with Abraham Hicks. Abundance as a birthright. It's a powerful concept.
It really is.
Yeah.
And I think what's really come up for me is just how powerful our beliefs are, especially around money. Like they really can shape our reality.
Totally. And speaking of shaping our reality, before we wrap things up, I think it's important to touch on something that sometimes gets lost in all this talk about manifesting.
Okay, what's that?
Action.
Oh, right. Because it's one thing to shift your mindset and, embrace abundance and all that.
Yeah.
But we have to actually do something too.
Right. The universe loves a go-getter. We can't just sit around and wait for it to rain down on us.
Exactly. We have to take action. And the podcast host used this really great analogy. They said, it's like trying to tune into a radio station.
Okay.
So we've got to align our energy,
Yeah.
but then we actually have to, like, turn on the radio to hear the music.
I love that. Okay, so it's like we're, I don't know, co-creating our reality with the universe. It's not just about wishing and hoping.
Exactly. And those actions are going to look different for everyone. For some people, it might be starting a business. For others, it might be investing in their education or like asking for that raise.
It never feels aligned for you.
Exactly.
But it's about being proactive,
Yeah.
getting out of your comfort zone.
And trusting.
Which, let's be real, can be scary. But I think that's part of what makes it so rewarding, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Like we talked about before, abundance isn't just about money. It's about embracing everything, even the ups and downs.
The good, the bad, the ugly. It's
Wow.
all part of the journey.
Wow, so much good stuff to think about. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Abraham Hicks and manifesting abundance,
It's been a wild ride.
it really has. But the biggest takeaway here is this. You have the power to create a life you love, whatever that looks like for you.
It all starts with believing in yourself, believing that you deserve good things. And when you have that belief, you can achieve anything.
Beautifully said. And on that note, we'll leave you to continue your own journey toward abundance. Until next time, keep exploring, keep believing, and keep creating the life of your dreams.